Welcome. You are listening to the Fallen Earth podcast with Bennett. That's me, the only podcast I know of about Fallen Earth since every podcast got nuked off the face of the planet or infected with the Shiva virus when the global tech ruined the world. I am your host, Bennett, and we will be talking about all the things Fallen Earth, the divergent community it was, became, and now remains a phantom shadow of its former self. We will talk about all things related to Fallen Earth, including things that are not specifically Fallen Earth related, such as large gaming communities that saw the huge potential of the game and invested hard, heavy, and early in this antiquated gem of an MMO. For more information about Exile, go to exile.fyi or type in exile.chat in your browser. You'll be taken to our Discord. Take me to your leader. We are going hard in the paint on this Bainbridge document, and if you I've stuck around, keep sticking around. There's going to be a lot of other discussion later based on this documentation, what it means, how it applies. Is absolutely fascinating stuff this guy has written. This fellow by the name of William Bainbridge, and quite an impressive publisher, Springer Publishing. This is an academia, So I you got to stick it out. There's 23 pages. We're on page 7. I haven't stopped for a lot of commentary yet. I will probably refer to this document in future episodes and take, quotes and ideas from it, because there are some things in this document that really are fascinating to read, having just been a player and been immersed in that virtual civilization that was Fallen Earth, from Alpha to Omega, or Omicron, where Bill Bainbridge sound like such a hick. We're on non-player factions now. Page 7, bottom of page 7, actually. Many MMOs contain two kinds of factions. Number one, groups of non-player characters, each united around some cultural premise that provide challenges in a series of game missions. Or two, groups that contain some non-player characters but primarily serve to assemble teams of players. As sociologists of the Chicago School have long known, social disorganization on the large scale produces intense social organization on the small scale. So, Fallen Earth, logically, is the home of a large number of NPC factions. Interesting. Very interesting. Among the many interesting examples is clerics of gates. Now, everyone knows these as cogs. You go grind the cogs. But he recalls this as a cleric. He refers to them, from my memory, anyways, when I first read the document, as clerics of gates. So that might be hard for me to even conceptualize, because they're cogs. But among the many interesting examples is Clerics of Gates, a millenarian cult that wants to destroy the remaining people of Earth to usher in a reboot age that starts everything on a new basis, conceptualized as a new operating system. Exultant members shout computer commands. Control C, page down, escape, escape, alt tab, alt tab. I believe this is a parody of The Road Ahead by Bill Gates, Pope of the Microsoft Church. And the fundamental idea is replacing all human laws by computer code. Players cannot join this faction, nor can they develop either positive or negative reputation with it, but it can be found in several areas and is the focus of many missions. It is described more fully earlier in my earlier book, E-Gods. A similar widely dispersed NPC faction is the Judges, a religious group sufficiently well organized to operate churches that seeks to save a few divinely chosen survivors, killing all of the unworthy. One of its recruiters proclaims, "I've come to purge the unworthy, to separate them from those who could still achieve true enlightenment and salvation." Evil creates fear and corrupts those who might be saved. They hide from what they know to be righteous, blinded by those around them who have spread their corruption. I am here to end the oppression of the righteous and rescue the souls who have been trapped. This recruiter also explains why a player cannot join. I see you are soulless. Tonight, after prayer and meditation, I will cry for you and all that you will never achieve. You are fortunate that you have no capacity to understand the joy of faith. You would mourn the false life the wicked ones have cursed you with. That is to say, as an artificially created clone, a player's avatar lacks a soul and thus is an abomination deserving pity, but also destruction. A player can earn positive reputations with 6 of the NPC groups, not including the clerics or judges, but does not earn a reputation less than 0 by opposing them, as does happen with the player factions. Killing bandits of many kinds has the secondary consequence of increasing the player's reputation with townspersons, who are the ordinary inhabitants of the many small communities of NPCs trying to survive across the devastated landscape. But killing townspersons does not lead to a negative reputation with them. Bankers run the Grand Canyon financial system, to the extent there is one, and operate local storage facilities where players can keep many virtual resources. Each avatar carries a small inventory, and each of the 5 mounts Gibbon ultimately earned after discarding the feeble horse he began with could store a little as well. But bank vaults were much larger. Franklin's riders were named after Benjamin Franklin, the Postmaster General of the United States. The first Postmaster General of the United States, and their function was communication between towns. After doing many missions for them, Gibbon earned one of the very highest quality horses available in this virtual world. By level 55, he had positive reputations with all 3. Townspersons, 11,226 rep. Bankers, 18,782 rep. And Franklin's Riders, 30,280 rep. 3 other NPC factions conferring reputations were hostile to other groups, similar to Clerics of Gates and the Judges. Shiva's favored have some similarities to Clerics of Gates, but are at odds with them. Near the entrance to an abandoned missile silo containing 4 nuclear warheads, Enoch explains, "We are the heirs of the earth. Shiva has touched and reshaped the world, and its blood is his blood, as it is our blood. Your time is short now, your days numbered. And when the cogs release what they call the purifying fire, the last traces of your cloying, insipid species will be expunged. We shall praise Shiva as radioactive flames spill forth from these silos and wash the land clean." Shiva, of course, is the Hindu god of destruction, and the Fallen Earth Wiki explains that a virus plague named after this deity was largely responsible for the fall of world civilization. Officially, the Shiva virus is identified in 2054, with its point of origin being somewhere between India and Pakistan, where it was believed to be a biological weapon and resulted in a nuclear exchange between the two countries. A strain of the virus known as Shiva 2 spread through the remainder of Asia as a result of this nuclear exchange and set off further nuclear incidents. In 2056, approximately 2 years after its identification, a variant of the Shiva virus reaches the Hoover Dam region where a great deal of the population die. However, it has not been ascertained whether the Shiva virus or protracted nuclear exchange was the root cause of this. Note that 3 unconverged advanced technologies are involved. Number 1, information technology promoted by clerics of Gates. Number 2, biological technology inspiring Shiva's favored. And number 3, nuclear technology over which they compete. Gibbon often killed members of Shiva's favored and did very few missions for them, nearing the end of his explorations with a neutral 0 reputation. Then he discovered their outpost called Tabara in the high-level Deadfall region. Roxa, the local leader, explained the origins of Shiva's favorite and told Gibbon they hoped to change course, no longer doing everything they could to pollute the environment. We became what we are to survive. Our ancestors were scientists who were brought here from far away by global tech. During the fall, they used their knowledge to save themselves. If not for these changes, they would have perished. They had to adapt. When we are out of the wastes, the changes stop, but without any pollutants, we soon die. Pure air and earth are poisonous to us. For a long while, we hoped to pollute your lands just enough so that we could survive and the mutations would stop. We've since learned that this path is folly. The continual battles between our people weaken us both. No, what we must do is find a way for our people to survive in your lands without pollutants. We've developed a serum that keeps us alive for a while. Unfortunately, another group, those who call themselves the Shiva's Blessed, have stolen the serum from us. The Shiva's Blessed revel in the changes wrought upon them. They don't care that they are being reduced to primal beasts. Given accepted a mission to retrieve the serum, then undertook many more missions for Shiva's favored, eventually gaining a reputation of 17,554 within and earning his most advanced mount, a gigantic mutated wolf, the general size and shape of a rhinoceros. Another group he encountered was the Human League, who wanted to destroy all mutants and shut down the LifeNet stations so that clones like himself would perish. In Deadfall, he interacted more positively with them, and ended his reputation at 1500K. No, 15K. No, 1,500. 1K. Another group interested in LifeNet, which he never fully understood, was the Outsiders, with whom he eventually had a 0 reputation despite doing submissions for their agents in Los Alamos, the town in New Mexico that had played a significant role in the development of the atomic bomb. Non-player factions differ in terms of the complexity of their ideologies, yet central are themes of technology, religion, and the meaning of life in the face of death. Okay. Page 9. As in most MMOs, Fallen Earth's virtual territory is organized into a sequence of sectors for avatars of even higher experience scores. Sector 1, called Plateau, is primarily populated by NPC factions to give the player time to become accustomed to the gameplay before interacting with the 6 joinable factions. The largest town is Embry Crossroads, and the many crashed aircraft in its vicinity suggest that it was named after Embry Riddle Aeronautical University, which has a campus in Prescott, Arizona. Player factions are the first encountered in Northfields, the second sector, where the main population and commercial center was New Flagstaff, a ruined city center in a rather more uniform architectural style than today's real Flagstaff. Figure 10-1 shows one of the huge mutant wolves trained to be a mount for a player in the Central Park of New Flagstaff, which is a focus for social life, having storage facilities, an auctioneer, and other vendors. And then there's a picture of a blight wolf. Gibbon entered Northfields at level 18 of experience, and by level 22 had developed strong positive or negative reputations with all 6 factions, then went through a major realignment over the next 3 levels. The ideologies of these 6 groups are reflected in a very large number of missions in which non-player characters express their beliefs and assign Gibbon tasks expressive of their worldviews. Below, I've summarized the ideological focus of each group, adapting text from 3 sources: the Fallen Earth Wiki, the game's website, and the user interface inside the game. So, here's a description of the factions. I mean, if you're listening to this, you know. But here we go. Lightbearers Society. Sages who seek... Oh, okay, maybe not. This is okay. I'm not giving Mr. Bainbridge here enough credit. He got a lot of education. Lightbearers focus on society. Sages who seek to restore the old world through medical healing, favorable biological mutations, and spiritual enlightenment. Mystics, healers, and warriors united on a quest for harmony and peace. This, just on a side note, this was the faction that I chose. As soon as I was able to, I really dug their whole thing. But you know, factions are divisive. Vistas, their focus is nature. Environmentalists who believe that nature's law is primary and anything that damages the natural ecology should be outlawed. They work to create a harmonious existence between mankind and nature. Children of the Apocalypse, or Chota for short. Their focus is chaos. Anarchists who seek to prevent the reestablishment of stable government because they believe it would lead to another catastrophe. They work to destroy the remains of the old world to create a new world where all men are free. Travelers, self-focused, wandering individualists who place personal economic gain before all other values and resist the constraints of community and law. They do what it takes to get the most benefit with the lowest cost, even if that means breaking a kneecap or 2. Techs. Focus is science. Scientists and engineers who hope to tinker the world back together, considering technology to be the fundamental basis of civilization. Only by restoring the scientific accomplishments of the old world can the new world be saved. And enforcers focus on order. Militarists who believe they are the primary defenders of law and order, perceived opponents as the enemies of human freedom. Perceived by opponents as the enemies of human freedom. They labor tirelessly to restore law and societal standards in a world where chaos and death reign. These 6 factions are divided into 3 pairs of archenemies: enforcers, chotas, lightbearers, travelers, and vista techs. Each represents an ideological dimension that has implications for society's laws: society versus self, order versus chaos, and chaos versus science. And they are. Let's start that part over. Um, each represents an ideological dimension that has implications for society's laws: society versus self, order versus chaos, and nature versus science. Each faction had two allies, plus two enemy factions that are the allies of the archenemy. Table 10.2 shows the reputation scores he had achieved at 6 different points on his ascent of the experience ladder to the level cap at 55. And it just shows Gibbons, who is the more violent one. Not afraid to kill people. So it looks like he ended up a Vista. Yep. Okay, it's a big chart, got a whole bunch of numbers. But at the end of the day, at 55, he was. Oh. Now, wait a minute. Gibbons changing reputations. So it. Okay, now this is an interesting chart here because he starts out Vista, and then at level 22, and at level 25 he's got more faction with tech, 64k with tech. Level 35 he's got still 72k highest faction tech, and level 38 187,000 faction tech. And there's an extra column here. It says 55B. I don't know. That couldn't be Sorkin because he'd have to kill people. I'm going to say that that's Sorkin. Well, let's keep reading. For a time, he did many missions for the Vistas, who were allied with the Chota, even doing a few missions for Chota NPC located in the Vista town, killing Enforcer NPC spies and gaining negative reputation with the Enforcers. Despite their being allies with the Lightbearers. At level 22, I decided for research purposes that Gibbon had learned enough about the Lightbearers and Vistas and really needed to go belong to the tech faction, thus allied with both the Enforcers and the Travelers, even though he then had very bad reputations with them. At that point in the history of Fallen Earth, the general algorithm for rewarding reputation points was as follows: earning plus X points with one faction earned plus X times 2 with each of its allies, minus X times 2 with its enemies, and fully minus X times 2 with its arch enemy. Negative reputation with a faction prevents one from doing missions for that faction in order to regain a neutral reputation. That's interesting because he's talking about shoulder factions that's gone. But I think a very bad move to do. We'll get into my opinions about what happened to Fallen Earth and how to fix it later, but if it will ever be fixed. One plan was to move Gibbon back to mission activity for Lightbearers, thus slowly building his reputation back up with their allies, the Enforcers. Then, once he was positive with the Enforcers, to do missions for them, thereby building up his reputation with their ally tech. However, this looked like it could take a lifetime. Another plan was to build his reputation more directly with tech by killing their arch enemies, the Chota, but experience soon showed him that he would need to kill more than 2,000 of them to achieve this goal by this route. Well, that ain't 2,000. That ain't nothing, bruh. Luckily, he encountered a disaffected NPC in New Flagstaff who gave him a once in a lifetime opportunity to erase all of his reputation at no cost, giving him a zero reputation with tech that allowed him to visit their town and begin doing missions for them, achieving level 25 with the results shown in Table 10.2. Okay, that kind of explains it a bit. So I was looking at that table and I'm like, well, what? Wait a minute, how did he spend that? So he just drank the juice, the chupacabra cologne. This simulates a very real phenomenon in human society in which we considered in Chapter 6, the iron law of oligarchy, because the oligarchy tends to organize itself into competing factions. It is not possible to obey all of the norms. At the extreme, it is thus not possible to avoid being a criminal, merely possible to choose which laws to violate by allying oneself with a particular faction and following its distinctive normative patterns. People who refuse to violate any norms supported by any faction in the oligarchy naturally drop down into the underclass, where they can be exploited by all the factions. Societies vary in the degree to which they have a mechanism like the one in Fallen Earth for a fresh reputational start, for example, via religious conversion or by moving to a new community. The iron law of oligarchy. Just after the first of my phases of research in May 2012, blows my mind. Started researching. He says just after the first of my phases of research in May 2012, which means that he may have been doing this research prior. Fallen Earth added new player versus player features which required a simplification to the faction reputation system. No longer would there be what the designers called shoulder factions that gained or lost reputation when Gibbon did work for or against one of their allies. Months earlier, the developer's blog had explained, with the introduction of global territory control, a system that combines the recently introduced faction territory control keep mechanics with conflict towns and allows players to capture territory to contribute towards a global advantage for their faction. We also want to make sure it is clear to all players who they are fighting for and who they are fighting against. Thus, the reputation system fragmented into 3 pairs of enemies with no implications for each other, which is what Spengler and Sorokin experienced when they entered later on. In theory, Gibbon could have begun killing enforcers without affecting his tech reputation. And after 1,000 of those murders, could have gained a positive reputation with Chota. This change in the system represents what can happen in a real-world social system when the relations between factions shift. Some individuals may be able to realign some of their allegiances, but other individuals, like Gibbon, will be so heavily invested that they cannot do so. Indeed, social disorganization can exist on multiple levels that fluctuate somewhat separately. It is seldom the case that an individual can consider all the political issues of the day, form an idiosyncratic perspective on each of them, and then find a faction or combination of factions to achieve perfect ideological harmony. When Gibbon completed most missions in Northfields, he had consolidated his relationship with the 6 major factions. He moved on to Kaibab Forest region and the 3rd sector, which represents the real Kaibab National Forest around the Grand Canyon in Arizona. There he found towns for all 6 factions plus neutral towns, and for a while dwelled in Kimtown, the tech base, Kaibab possessed somewhat fewer and less interesting missions to perform, so it was a chore to advance his experience level, chiefly through hunting and gathering. Most of the missions he did undertake at this point in his ascent up the experience ladder in Fallen Earth involved competition between the factions to which he was already committed. After Kaibab Forest came some high level regions, and Gibbon did many interesting missions in Deadfall and Alpha County, plus a couple in Terminal Woods. Deadfall lacks towns belonging to the six player factions and is centered on Los Alamos, which is neutral with respect to the factions. There, Gibbon sometimes observed duels or pitched battles between players belonging to competing factions, but he was not forced to participate in them. Alpha County, also called Sector 4, did have faction towns, and the tech base was Camp Sagan, undoubtedly named for the popular scientist Carl Sagan. Alpha County was a dangerous quarantine region, separated from other regions by an immense wall guarded by sentries operating high powered guns that could be reached only from a special post mortem relocation life pod at the southern end of Terminal Woods. Several times, Gibbon was offered missions that were contrary to his three factions, representing aggravated social disorganization in the highest regions, but he refused to accept them. As his reputation with the tech faction increased, Gibbon had received promotions up 4 ranks: student, apprentice, journeyman, and technician. As we've seen, Gibbon earned nice rewards in the form of elite mounts, a thoroughbred horse, a mutated wolf he could ride, from gaining reputation with Franklin's riders and Shiva's favored. So, Fallen Earth offers many ways of rising in status beyond simple levels of experience from 1 to 55. Each of the 11 trade skills also offered status ladders, and practicing a trade skill could also raise general experience. For example, something like a third of Gibbon's general experience gained over the last 10 levels came from simply making paper, using his science skill. Trade skills also are central to the economy because players buy and sell both raw materials and finished products. Table 10.2 has 2 columns for level 55 because I decided that Gibbon should again change factions for the final phase of research. I paid about 10 real dollars to again set player faction reputations to 0. This permitted him again to build a positive reputation with the Vistas. So that's what that B column was for. So he went Vista, the environmental Vista. This will be, yeah, we'll get through this one and then we'll wrap it. We're almost through. It's page 13. To understand the Fallen Earth factions better, we can examine one more closely, the Vistas. Sorkin and Gibbon completed all the soloable Vista missions they could find. Sorkin limited to Sector 2, and Gibbon visited all the settlements belonging to this faction. They are usually called camps rather than towns or fortresses because this environmentalist group tended to camp out in the wilderness. The Fallen Earth Wiki explains. Before the fall, the Vistas were an environmentalist movement that had come to the Grand Canyon province to oppose global tech's methodical environmental exploitation. But now they have become the last defenders of what remains of the ecosystems of the old world. While always willing to commit acts of violence in defense of the environment, since the fall, they have become feared wilderness warriors who protect their charges with rifle and blade. Vistas are not opposed to technology in general, but they are opposed to the single-minded pursuit of technology at the expense of the natural world. This, they believe, was the impetus for the fall of the old world. Although some Vista NPCs are encountered in Sector 1, it is not possible to join them until Sector 2, where they occupy Thorn's Bluff in the Pleasant Hill area in the south of Northfields. The area used to be a zoo. It used. It used to be a zoo. It used to be a zoo. Before this, before the fall of civilization, symbolically appropriate location for the vistas. A decorative brick wall surrounds the settlement, not providing much protection, and a pond with an island at its center. Several stone buildings had apparently housed small animals on display, and few have been co opted for the armor craft and ballistics workshops and the medical and science laboratories. Other facilities occupy improvised tents of many different shapes and sizes. Several outdoor pens are occupied by tame animals, including a panther, a bear, a gorilla, and a wolf. Some of the more dangerous and numerous beasts and explorer encounters in the wider wilderness are African lions, which presumably multiplied ferociously after escaping from this zoo. In Sector 3, Kaibab Forest, the main Vista settlement, is named Gaia after the Earth goddess. It is primarily a heavily wooded and rather large round area enclosed by a dirt wall topped with ruins of low stone wall. But some occupied buildings are outside this barrier, which it is easy to climb over. Exactly what this area was before the fall is not entirely clear, but one area looks like an old turnstile. Hmm. But one area looks like an old style tourist motel, in which small cabins are arranged in an arc near a larger building. A long distance away, on the other side of the high hill capped with a large building, stand three primitive privies where tourists in bygone days might have performed private bodily functions. All structures are built from virtual wooden boards and shingles, having peaked roofs except for a concrete building housing the science laboratory, with a domed extension that looks as if it might have been a small planetarium. The Vista's inhabitants of Gaia live and work over a very wide area, as if they prefer solitude rather than clustering together for emotional support. Among the few additions they have made are some dog pens and a solar panel array on the hillside. Not far away, they have been building a geothermal power plant shown in Figure 10.2, itself powered on an interim basis by wind turbines. There's a note here from the publisher, or to the publisher. Okay. Kaibab Forest also contains an unnamed cluster of widely separated vista tents in the timberland area, a couple miles east of Kimtown, the tech headquarters. Each tent is large, hexagonal, and raised above the ground, with perhaps a dozen Vista Ranger NPCs walking around it. The trees are somewhat separated in this area, but still numerous. Growing around the tents are harvestable vegetables, sugarcane, grain, and fruit. On a hill to the west, overlooking the tents, is a set of small square tents and a cooking fire, flanked by cactus and minder ferns, which is one could harvest acid and healing accelerants for use in concocting medicines. Between the Vista outpost and Kimtown lies a toxic pool, a deep, heavily polluted valley inhabited by humanoid mutants, representing the serious conflict between Tech and Vista in their orientation toward technology. This outpost offers Vista faction members no resources other than harvestables and no quests, but gives members of the Tech faction a way to earn resources and experience by killing Vista Rangers. The highest level Vista base is in Alpha Zone, a near lifeless blasted territory centering on the blockade PvP battle zone. Called Unspoiled Grove, the base is a tiny forest inside a crater whose walls protect against incursions by monstrous beasts. The entrance is a gap into the crater wall, flanked by observation towers bravely flying the Vista flag of a green tree spreading its branches into a nearly perfect circle, representing the Earth. Several structures could be called tents, yet remind me of the curved, soaring roof of Yale University's hockey rink, designed by Eero Saarinen, who was a Yale alumnus. A huge central structure was assembled higgledy-piggledy from girders and sheets of junk metal that were cut from the sides of wrecked trucks. It is possible to climb up on the roofs and look down upon the peaceful green trees and the many vista flags here and there. A half a dozen NPCs give a small number of quests, 3 of which require teams, and Unspoiled Grove mainly serves as a staging area for teams preparing to battle against the techs and other enemies inside the blockade battleground. Okay. Next time, we will start on this section, page 15, A Skillful Economy. We are more than halfway through. So, why am I reading all of this? Well, why did the guy write all of this? I'm asking the community. What do you think? There's a polling and question feature that I can activate after a few episodes. And I know that there are at least a couple of people out there that would have things to say and comments to make. So, as I said in the first episode, I will have guests on the podcast, and we'll talk about stuff, and we'll reminisce, and it'll be great. But this is still kind of all part of setting the stage and understanding what Fallen Earth is, what it was. So, until next time, boosh.